This is a review lesson on cell structure. In this lesson, we will tackle two topics. First, we'll discuss common cell parts that both plant cells and animal cells have in common. And then we'll move on and specifically talk about cell parts that are unique to plant cells, parts that animal cells do not have. During this review lesson, I suggest that you have your notebook open and you have a chart to keep track of the parts and their purposes. Your chart will look like this. If you'd like to take a moment and pause the video now so that you can copy down this chart, this will be the order in which we discuss each of the cell parts. Okay, so let's start with common cell parts. In this diagram, we've got a plant cell and an animal cell. The first part we need to talk about is the lining that holds all the parts together that both cells have in common. This lining is called the cell membrane. So the cell membrane has a special purpose, and that is to hold everything together. So over here on our function and purpose side, we can say that the cell membrane holds the cell together, and in doing so, it also controls what goes in and out of the cell. So the cell membrane is not solid. It has holes in it and allows good things to come in and bad things to leave the cell. All right, let's move on to our next common cell part. So far we've discussed the membrane. Next we need to discuss what's inside the membrane. Not any particular part in here, but instead the material that all these parts are floating in. So in this animal cell, it's the pink. In this plant cell, it's this green area here. This is going to be the cell membrane. Excuse me, the cytoplasm. So let's talk about the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is jelly-like, and it has cell parts floating in it. This is where a lot of the chemical reactions happen in a cell. Once again, the cytoplasm is the jelly-like substance that fills the cell. The cell parts, or organelles, is another name for cell parts. The organelles float in this material, and this is what takes up the inside of the cell. Next, we're going to look at the mitochondria. Looking at the mitochondria, here we can see it's the blue structure here in the plant cell, and it's going to be this green structure here, the blue structure in the animal cell and the green structure in the plant cell. This is the mitochondria. Mitochondria is what provides power or energy to the cell. If we were to compare a car to a cell, in a car, the alternator would be like the mitochondria. It takes the fuel and turns it into energy. In a country, a mitochondria would be like its power plant. In your home, the mitochondria would be like a generator, an emergency generator that you use in case of a power outage. Let's move on to the nucleus. The nucleus, both plant and animal cells have it, both. It's usually the biggest organelle in the cell. You can usually see it even with a low-powered microscope. And the purpose of the nucleus is it controls the cell. And this is where the instructions are housed. All the instructions for running a cell are contained in the nucleus. It's kind of like the boss of the cell. It's like the government. It controls all the rest of the cell. Let's move back now and let's focus just on our plant cell. Let's look at these green structures here. You'll notice these are not found in the animal cell. These green structures are what makes plants green, at least their leaves and sometimes their stems. Those structures are green because they contain a chemical called chlorophyll. So the structures are called chloroplasts. These are going to use sunlight to make sugar. This is where plants make their food. This is why a lot of plants taste sweet, like strawberries, peaches, berries in general. The chloroplasts use sunlight to make sugar, so they're like a solar panel. Let's go back to our diagram of the plant cell again. Now let's look at this unique structure on the outside of the cell here. Notice the animal cell does not have that. So the animal cell has kind of a rounder shape because it only has the cell membrane holding it together. The plant cell here has this thicker structure on the outside. This is the cell wall. The cell wall adds strength and support to the cell. Like a cell membrane, it's not solid though. There are holes in it that allow things to come in and out. Because remember, cells are alive, so they need raw materials coming in and they need waste to be able to exit. So just like the membrane that both the animal and plant cell have, the cell wall also has holes in it. And if you look here, here's one of those holes that allows the bad things out and the good things in. So once again, that's the cell wall. It adds strength and support to the cell. Cell walls contain a material called cellulose. This is what paper is made out of. So we deal with cell walls all the time. All right, let's look at the last one here. Our last structure is the central vacuole. If you look at this plant cell, you'll notice there's one big structure in it. Almost looks like a swimming pool. That structure here is the central vacuole. And this is going to store two things. It's going to store water for the plant cell, and it's going to store food that was made by the chloroplast. In other words, sugar, different forms of sugar sometimes. So the central vacuole stores food and water for the cell. This is located here. You'll notice animal cells do not have that. This is one of the reasons why plant cells and plants in general can sometimes go dormant and survive, because they can store their food and water in here. Animal cells do not have that storage. They can't store it. So this has been a review of common cell parts and specialized plant cell parts. These are all the vocabulary terms that'll be on the quiz for cell parts. If you have any questions or you just want to watch the video again, you can rewind at this point. Otherwise, this review video is done.